Joining us now to discuss Trump's 100 days, it's Vance Ginn, president of Ginn Economic Consulting and former chief economist at the Office of Management and Budget. Also joining us is Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of the Brownstone Institute and a senior economic columnist with the Epoch Times. So first of all, good morning to you both. I just want to focus here on just a few specific areas, and starting with one of Trump's bigger campaign promises, and that is lowering prices at the grocery store. Vance, I'll start with you today. How do you say he's doing there?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And I think we have seen some prices go down. Eggs has been one of the ones that's made the news the most, but there were other issues going on with that as well. But overall, we're still seeing inflation running pretty hot. I mean, the core, where you exclude food and energy, which of course we all buy food and energy, but it's still running about 3%, which is higher than the 2% that the Federal Reserve would like. We've also seen other prices continue to go up. And so we haven't seen declines yet, which is tough to do. But I think what we also have seen is a lot of uncertainty in the economy. When you have this much uncertainty, it makes it difficult for businesses to start lowering prices with all this other stuff that's going on with trade and other things that we'll talk about.
Okay, Jeffrey, your thoughts here. Where are grocery prices headed?
Right now, the real-time inflation rate, but I'm basing this on the data tool called Trueflation, is showed a remarkable and sudden drop after the inauguration, down to running at about 1.4 to 1.5%. That is reflected somewhat in CPI. Of course, CPI is probably not as precise as this tool. And the other thing is that a lot of times we measure inflation year over year. So, month over month or day over day, like Trueflation does, is going to generate different numbers. But the numbers look pretty impressive. I'm not sure this is entirely due to the Trump administration, though. If you look at, well, maybe to some extent, but if you look at the money stock as it stands today, it is actually lower today than it was 3 years ago. So, we've seen a pulling back on the quantitative easing that characterized the COVID years. And we might be, combined with the shifts in velocity, just seeing the after effects of that. But anyway, it has been something of a relief to at least lower the intensity of the price increases. And as Mr. Ginn says, this is not yet price declines. We're probably not going to see that. But overall, it has been one of the things that the Trump administration can at least list as one of the achievements of the first 100 days.
So Vance, to your point that you said inflation is still running hot. In March, we saw U.S. consumer prices fall for the first time in nearly 5 years, according to the Labor Department. And that's a good thing, right? What do you think is the main driver behind this? And can you comment on where does Trump's economic policies fit into this?
Well, it's a combination of things. You got to look at the supply and the demand. We've also seen some demand fall off over the last month or so. That's also could push prices lower across the economy. And as Mr. Tucker said, we can't look just month to month. We've got to look over a longer time horizon. And so when you look at what happened with the tariffs that were put in place mostly in April, some of them are suspended. There's a lot of uncertainty that's going on there. But what I want to look at is the next couple of months. What happens to inflation? Does it continue to go down month over month? Or are we going to start seeing some of the supply shocks that are coming from these trade disruptions? Are those going to start to filter into many of the prices that we buy? One other thing that we should look at is the money stock, as Mr. Tucker mentioned, is starting to go up again. So it was going down for a while. It's starting to come back up over the last few months. That also is a concern for me that we might see more inflationary pressures, not only from the money supply, which is where real inflation comes from, but also many of the goods that we buy are imported from other countries. And by the way, about half of our goods that we import are intermediate goods. So those get passed along through the form of higher prices to the final consumer that we also got to watch out for over the next few months.
Yeah, that's right, Jeffrey. We have to consider the angle of the consumer as well. And on that point, consumer sentiment, it seems, has dropped, with the University of Michigan's index hitting its lowest level since November 2022. Does this suggest that consumers are at least not optimistic about Trump's economic agenda?
I did a deep dive into this whole consumer survey in an article for Epoch Times a couple of days ago, and I was a little bit surprised at the lack of rigor of that survey, actually. It turns out that once you kind of dig into the data, it's highly political, and you see hugely divergent opinions based on political party, and based on that, it looks like it's more of a measure of people's political loyalties than actual consumer sentiment. That's surprising to me to discover that, because I've always sort of trusted it. It's like not a government source. Oh, it's university. These academics know what they're doing. But once you dig into it, I don't tend to. I think that survey is a little bit deprecated in my own mind in terms of its legitimacy and authenticity as a forecaster. That said, I agree. I mean, this tariff situation is very destabilizing and a little bit surprising. One of the things that Americans have learned, I'm grateful for this, since this trade war began, is that it's not just about retail prices, not just about the retail consumer. American businesses strongly rely on, for intermediate goods, the import prices there. And so it's by and large hurt a lot of, especially small businesses that rely on stable import prices. We have not seen the tariffs yet reflected, I think, in upward price pressure. We may yet. But I tell you, one of the things that's fascinating to consider is the way in which imports figure into the GDP calculations. So what we saw in the first quarter of this year was vast increase in imports in anticipation of these tariffs to prepare for them. That has given us record trade deficits, which in GDP calculations figures against output. I don't think it should, but it does. So the GDP reporting could be actually much worse than many people are expecting as a result of this anticipatory buying in advance of the tariffs.
Right. Okay. Vance, you mentioned egg prices earlier. I actually have a clip for you guys. Here's what the administration is saying about egg prices. Watch.
When I came to office, they said the eggs are gone through the roof. Eggs. I said, what the hell are they talking about? I was there for 4 days, and they were blaming me for eggs, and they've gone up like 6 times or something, some record number. You couldn't get them. And I gave it to Brooke, and I just saw the other day they're down 73%. Right? That's pretty good. And the press doesn't mention that. Nobody talks about it, so but I know.
So Vance, let me get your thoughts on this. According to the latest consumer price index, U.S. egg prices increased again last month to reach a record high, it seems like, of $6.23 per dozen. Vance.
Well, look, I mean, there were some other things that were going on over the last few months. There were a number of chicken production places where eggs were happening, where they had to get rid of them under the Biden administration, under some other types of regulations that were put in place. And so that reduce the supply. And that was a huge supply shock. And so once those were able to come back online, more eggs being produced, we saw the prices come down. I don't necessarily think that was, the Trump administration doing that. That was kind of the market correcting from what happened during the Biden administration. And so we saw egg prices come down. What I will say, though, that I think has been really important about the first 100 days of the Trump administration is the amount of deregulation that's happening. There's a lot of rollback of the regulations that were put in place by the Biden administration. It's also one of the things that I think we need to look at moving forward about the amount of executive orders that are done by a president, whether it's Democrat or Republican, that makes so much more uncertainty in our economy. It's very difficult for businesses to expect what their profitability is going to be in the future if they don't know what their cost structure is going to be. So you add in the regulation from one to the other, and I'm for the deregulation the Trump administration is going through. But I just want to point out that this does create some uncertainty out there, along with the trade stuff that's going on. And then you see the deficits. Deficits are also reaching record levels. Because even as we are bringing in more revenue from the tariffs, remember, that's a tax on Americans. I think we should make sure that the audience understands that you bring in more revenue, but we're also increasing spending at a rapid pace, even as DOGE, which I'm also in favor of DOGE, what Elon Musk is doing is exposing all this fraud, waste, and abuse. But we need Congress to act. to actually bring down spending. They have the power of the purse, and I wish they would start doing their job more, because if we don't, we're going to continue to run massive deficits and debt for the future. And by the way, the Trump tax cuts of 2017, they also expire. All the individual tax rates those marginal rates will go up at the end of this year if something is not done. That, I think, is something that really should be at the front lines of what's done next by Congress, is to get those Trump tax cuts extended, made permanent. I would like to see as lower rates as possible and get away from some of this other uncertainty and other things. And at the end of the day, one other thing I would mention is that I would like to see Congress also take back this idea of the power of the purse from tariffs. I don't think that the president should have this much power of putting tariffs in place really at their own whim. This should be up to Congress to decide.
Okay, piggybacking off of Vance's one point of deregulation, I think we've seen that actually in Trump's energy policy. So I have another clip for you guys. Here's the vice president's latest comments on energy.
And that will mean that we have to produce more energy. It's more energy production and more energy consumption. And it's one of the many reasons why I think our nations have so much to gain by strengthening our energy ties. As President Trump is fond of saying, America has once again begun to drill, baby, drill. And we think that will inure to the benefit of Americans.
So, Jeffrey, has Trump significantly advanced his drill, baby, drill energy agenda?
Well, yes, he has. And this is, I think, has to count as one of the triumphs of this administration. In general, these executive orders, as they pertain to energy and deregulation and so on, are just beautiful to read. It's been, for me, the most exciting part of the first 100 days, these sweeping orders. I've been disappointed the way that he's faced this kind of federal district judges issuing these nationwide injunctions against many of the deregulation things, against his attempt to curb the administrative state. Those things are going to have to be resolved by the Supreme Court at some point. The Supreme Court just basically has to recognize that the president is head of the executive branch, and until that happens, there's always going to be continued questions about whether these executive orders can be implemented. Are they real? Can business really depend on whether this deregulation are we really going back to a free enterprise model or not? I mean, it all hinges on these federal judges and whether their edicts are legitimate. Another problem is that while DOGE has done tremendous work, Congress has not backed what DOGE has done. So yes, spending is still increasing despite all the work that Elon and his team have done. This has been a grave disappointment. The Congress is just simply not cooperating with the Trump administration on its attempt to restrain the budget.
Okay, Vance, we just have about a minute or so. You get the final thought here.
Well, I think when you look at the first 100 days, I think there's been a lot of good, as we've discussed here on the deregulatory side. I think there's also been some good of trying to make it to where we are passing the Trump tax cuts and putting something forward with reconciliation and other things. But I think that there are some things that need improvement, and that it goes with the trade and protectionism. I think we need more free trade. We need to be cutting taxes and regulations and allowing for America to be the most competitive place in the globe, across the globe, and really allow for more prosperity here in America. And I think if we can put some of those pieces together, allow for DOGE to set the stage for Congress to cut spending and rein in spending over time, we'll be in a much better position for our economy moving forward. And Americans can have some certainty, whether they're businesses or individuals or whoever, they can really have more certainty for the future. If we can do some of those things, we'll be in a much better position, hopefully in the very soon future.
Well, all right. Thank you very much again for both of you coming on today, Vance and Jeffrey.
My pleasure.
Thank you.